Why was this church such an abject failure? Because they had failed in one of the primary tasks of God's people, and that is to develop a truly humble attitude, to have a true humility. Obviously, we ignore God's opposition to the proud at our peril, and that's exactly what these guys had done. And we see that Jesus had no tolerance for the Laodiceans' lack of humility. Zero tolerance. You know, fallen man is particularly susceptible to status seeking. It's really pretty much a universal characteristic of fallen people, fallen mankind, that we seek after status like buzzards seek after corpses. It's something that inherently in our brokenness we desire. We desire to be lifted up. We desire to be high. We desire to be noticed, to be above and to be better. And a lot of sociological studies back that up. And you know, a lot of times people say, no, not me. But I'm going to tell you, in this area of life, denial can be dangerous because look at this church. They were ate up with pride. Pride had gone to seed in Laodicea, and they weren't even aware of their pride. Jesus has to point it out. You know, practically everything that people do is tainted by pride and the status seeking that pride fuels. Everything's tainted by that. And a lot of people don't even see a problem with it. Even some Christians don't see a problem with it. And yet Jesus says very plainly, walk away from pride. Seek out humility. In Luke chapter 14, he goes to a wedding feast and he notices that people are trying to position themselves in the most honorable seat they can get. They're kind of scrambling to get into the better seats. And Jesus says, you're doing it wrong. If you're going to be followers of me, you need to seek out the lowest seat. Seek out the lowest seat. I'm sure the Laodiceans had read that and probably had reinterpreted it to mean the opposite in some way. But Jesus says that, in fact, that he closes that very passage in Luke chapter 14 with this well-known sentence, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. But humble yourself, and you will be exalted. Laodicea had forgotten about seeking the exaltation that comes from God, and they were seeking the exaltation that comes from man. And Jesus says, that's the very thing Jesus warns us against. If you humble yourself, you will be exalted in the right way. You'll be exalted in a way that's precious. You'll be exalted by God the Father, and that will bring glory and honor to Jesus. See, you can see how important that is if you think about it somewhat. Well, the Laodiceans had exalted themselves, but the time of their humbling has arrived. And Jesus is telling them plainly, it's here, it's at the door. Now, Jesus' condemnation here, and he has that, no commendation, but he has condemnation, and it's much worse than for any of the others, even for Sardis. Sardis, he said, you're dead, but he did say, there is a little bit remaining alive, but you need to wake up and strengthen that before it's about to die too. Well, as bad as it would be to be said that you are dead, it seems that Jesus' opinion of Laodicea was even worse. Jesus revealed their arrogance, and he proceeded to reveal the truth that their prideful self-image was based on lies. They said they didn't need anything. They believed that they needed nothing. They believed that they were truly rich. But Jesus said, you have not seen this, but the reality is this, the truth of this. Remember, I am the faithful and true witnesses, and here's what the truth is, the opposite of what you have believed. You are wretched, pitiable. See, they thought, man, people ought to be looking up to us. Look how well we've done. And yet Jesus says, you are in reality pitiable. You say you're rich, but you are poor. You're blind. You're dressed to the nines with all the latest fashions and the finest of clothes, but you are naked. That's the reality. In other words, your true condition is the opposite of what you've come to believe. Now, that should be a thought-provoking statement for any church. And really, shouldn't that be a thought-provoking statement for any individual? These people really thought they were doing good. And they were doing the opposite. We need to be careful when we think we're doing well for God. We need to examine our motives. We need to examine what's happening as a result of our good works. We need to examine our hearts. What is our response when people notice our good works? Theirs was all wrong. Do you really realize how poor you are without Jesus? I mean, we all know the words. We all can say that. But in our hearts, do we really realize the truth of that? I mean, these guys had a lot of money. They felt pretty good about themselves, you know. We know the effect that money can have. We feel better when we've got a pad in our bank account. But Jesus makes it clear, as do the apostles, that the only thing that's really worth anything in this life is Jesus and his provision. That's all. Do we really believe that? Do we look to him alone for our status? Or do we look to our accomplishments, our awards, the fact that we can make people laugh? I've heard about that one. See? Wow. You know, are we really trusting 100% in what Jesus has done? What he's doing now? Are we really, these are trying times, right? Everybody talks about upcoming election, all these things going on. Are we really trusting 100% in Jesus and what he's going to do? And of course the answer is no. None of us are trusting Jesus 100%. If even Paul would say, I'm not saying that I have already made it. I've not already gained this, but I'm pressing on. And so really the question is not, are you 100%, but the question is, are you realizing the truth of where you are, and are you pressing on? Are you pressing on? Are you examining your motives? Are you examining your pride? Are you asking God, how can I how can I humble myself before you? How can I realize the goodness of Christ and trust in his care?